Please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone. Just let me go. Once upon a time, the pleas had been music to my ears. The sounds of skin chafing on rope and the jingling of chains were a beautiful backing to one of my favorite vocal tracks. Unfortunately, you can only listen to the same song so many times before it starts getting stale. Why are you doing this? I don't even know you. I've found that it's almost always the same desperate begging and the same indignant questions. It grew tiresome after a while. What difference did any of it make? They were all going to suffer and die at my hands regardless. Because I can, I said. She said something else after that, but I had stopped listening. I turned away from my captive, who was dangling naked from a rafter by chains at her wrists. I had grown bored of her whimpering, but soon would come the screams. The screams I don't think I will ever tire of. You might become tired of listening to your favorite song on repeat, but there is always a part of you that comes alive when the chorus kicks in. I walked over to the stack of crates with the sheet draped over them. There was a selection of different knives there, most designed for the purpose of butchering and carving meat. It was, after all, what they would be doing. I selected a knife with a small, sharp blade. This one wasn't made for butchery. It was actually made with working with fruit in mind. I like to start small, long, shallow cuts. It's less satisfying if it's over too quickly. As I walked back towards her, she started to struggle and fight harder. Desperation was winning out over logic. She couldn't possibly escape, but her simple animal brain had taken over now. I felt my own heartbeat picking up, the anticipation and excitement building. The fun was beginning now. I placed the tip of the blade on her inner thigh and gently pushed until I saw the first little pinprick of blood. Then, slowly, I started dragging the blade down her leg. She struggled harder, flailing her legs in the hopes of kicking me. Unfortunately for her, it was hard to kick someone with any real force when your legs were bound at the ankles. I had learned to make a point of doing that the hard way. An earlier plaything had kicked me in the head, and he was a lot bigger and stronger than she was. Once I reached her knee, I stopped the cut. I slipped the flat of the blade up to her abdomen before switching back to the sharp edge of the knife. You see, this was why I stripped my victims bare. I take no sexual pleasure in any of this. Fair play to those who do, far be it from me to criticize anybody's interests. But for me, it was all about making sure I had the maximum amount of space on my canvas for my art. The screams had started by then, and I was lost in the moment. It was the payoff for all of my hard work and preparation. My body thrummed with the thrill of it, like it was trying to harmonize with her agonized screeching. Her misery was my bliss. Reading that, I suspect you think me a monster. I don't blame you, I suppose. Perhaps I am. But I've given this a lot of thought. One doesn't just start carving up strangers like a pig spontaneously. I've had the desire to hurt people like this for as long as I can remember. Even as a child, I relished the pain of others. I learned to instigate fights just so I had the excuse to hit someone back. I found little subtle ways to make the other children yelp in fright and pain. Of course, I often got in trouble. I was taught to bury my compulsions. By the time I was a teenager, I was practically a model student and a respectable son. But that whole time, I was watching. I realized something. All of these rules and laws to stop us from hurting people are just about making other people who don't have the inclination for it feel better about themselves, morally superior. But all the while, we let people starve on the streets without a roof over their heads. We tolerate parents beating their children and call it discipline. We lock people up and deprive them of their freedom for victimless crimes. We invade other countries and impose our wills on their people and call those that die acceptable losses. Men, women, children, and everything in between die in droves, and we shrug it off and call that collateral damage. Perhaps not all of us are violent individuals, but humanity is a violent species. The only difference between me and all of those others is that I don't feel the need to make up excuses for my actions. This is who I am. This is who we all are deep down, I suspect. There's no difference between me and a person who laughs when their friend falls down the stairs, except that I'm more honest with myself. That's why when I changed to a more specialized knife and started peeling her skin off of her like an apple's, I felt no guilt. I felt no shame. The more she cried and screamed, the more I liked it. I was at peace with that. If you're not, that's your problem. You'll probably pass out from the pain soon, I told her. I'd appreciate you holding out as long as you can. This stops being fun when you're unconscious. But I understand that everyone has their limits and you're going to reach yours soon. So, if you have any final words, now might be a good time. Once you lose consciousness, I'm going to kill you and move on. I didn't really care what her last words were. I'm clearly not the sentimental sort. But saying things like that always made my victims quake in fear, and I do love that expression. Besides, sometimes they say something unique and interesting, and it makes them easier to remember. You won't get away with this. You're going to prison forever. You're going to spend the rest of your miserable life getting the shit kicked out of you by guys who are twice your size and guards who despise you. They'll crack your skull open with batons and fry you with tasers. I sighed. She didn't say anything particularly unique. She was hardly the first person to wish death on me or tell me I was doomed to prison. If I wasn't writing this down, I think I'd probably have forgotten her after a couple of years. Let me tell you a secret, I said. I have been getting away with it. I'm going to continue to get away with it. I am going to continue doing this until I can't anymore, and I am never going to suffer any kind of consequences. I am never going to have any attack of conscience over it. You are one in a long line of lumps of meat for me to play with, far from the first and in no way the last. Fuck you, she replied with all the eloquence you could really expect from someone who was trying not to howl as a filleting knife worked on her. I could tell she was trying not to scream, but she wouldn't be able to stop for long. You see, I picked you more or less at random. Most killers go for people they know. I don't. I've also never been convicted of any crimes. I've never even gotten a speeding ticket. So even if my prints or DNA show up on the scene when your body is eventually discovered, there is nothing that will lead the authorities to me. I move often, so there's no risk of people starting to notice any strange behavior or proximity to my crimes. I don't even stick to the same modus operandi. I'm cutting you to shreds. My last victim was a young man whose eyes I gouged out before I bludgeoned him to death with a hammer. Observable patterns in DNA are what get you caught. Neither of those are a problem with me. She started shouting for help, but she'd tried that already. She knew that there was nobody around who would hear her. Pretty soon, those sounds had devolved back into the wordless shrieks I so loved. I had started cutting deeper. That's right, I said. Scream for me. She did, and when she stopped, I slit her throat, collected my things, and left the building. I had a plane to catch in the morning, and there was no reason to hang around when the fun part was over. I didn't want to oversleep and miss my flight.
Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only talk about things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, mechanics, and any of that stuff is off limits unless it relates directly to how the story is being told. I'm Daniel Radford, author, arts enthusiast, and also your host. And today I'm joined by John Kernan as we continue our cycle on villains. In fact, as we conclude our cycle on villains.
Yes, just as planned.
I never know where he's going to go with these intros. You know, that one caught me off guard.
It's okay, I made a proper steeple with my hands when I said it.
I mean, I would expect nothing less.
The alternative was the classic Mr. Burns. Yes, excellent.
Jesus Christ. In, in case you can't tell from our sort of borderline delirious state in this fine episode that you find us in, we're also both barely conscious and really, really tired. So who
We
knows where this is going today?
we got this.
Speaking of things we have, John has a voice, the voice that you heard at the beginning of this episode, reading my short story. Everyone needs a hobby. Yes, that's really what that horrific nightmare scenario is called.
You definitely sound less tired there.
Great. Oh
And
fuck it.
it's true. Everyone needs a hobby.
Oh God. Let's just do the episode. So I had to make some choices with this one. I look back at the previous two episodes we did, and I was like, we've covered a decent amount of very diverse villains already. Between discussing Has Been, a show that is centered around redeeming formerly villainous people, and the various Batman canons, which deal with an assortment of interesting and complicated villains, I was like, what else is left?
Hmm.
And I realized that the major thing we hadn't done was a villain protagonist. You can argue that Has-Been has some villain protagonists, but not really.
It would have never been the first thing to jump in our heads. We've been too inundated by I'm the villain, but not actually villain protagonist anime. There's
You're
so
right.
many now.
There's a few. It got me thinking, right, that I mean, villain protagonists are rare, and like you said, it's pretty uncommon to go like all in on a villain protagonist and really explore how monstrously fucked up they are.
Yeah, most stories that have a villain protagonist either make them an anti-villain or some just outright lie even if they don't realize they're doing it and actually just make an anti-hero who's like, "Oh no, I'm the villain."
Off the top of my head, the only real examples I can think of at this moment are oh God, I had them there. They're there. The names are there, I promise. Dexter,
Oh yeah.
who, even as a very disturbing individual, is progressively more humanized throughout the show and is explicitly pseudo-possessed by some sort of supernatural entity in the books. Light from Death Note.
Yeah. Light is a good one. It's sad. There are very few things where you get to just unironically have the only protagonist be the villain as well because usually at best you have to get the compromise, and I don't mean compromise in quality because some of the stories that do this are great, but usually all we can get is the compromise of, okay, we will show you the protagonist of or we will show you the perspectives of two different opposing protagonists
Yeah.
like Light and L in Death Note.
And the Punisher, who most people don't even think is a villain.
That's that's the saddest part.
And thanks to a recent recording session I did for Fixation, the main cast of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they're horrible.
Of that group, I mean, they're all very messed up characters, but I'm like, really, that's all I've got. Like, there's definitely more out there, but it definitely because that being the list I could come up with should tell you that this isn't exactly a very prevalent thing to just go, you know what, I'm just gonna get in the head of probably one of the sickest, most fucked up, worst people imaginable. So that's what I chose to do, and then I made him read it.
Yeah, it had me thinking, it's actually a little bit of a shame that Heavy Rain was a video game made by the people who made Fahrenheit and Detroit Become Human, because you know what? I think that premise would make a great book. It would still have to be better written than the game, but
I've not actually played Heavy Rain. I've not watched it. I've heard it is very maligned, but Detroit Become Human is also very maligned, and I actually like that one. So
I like Detroit Become Human, but I think it has a lot of issues and is also very much like placatingly playing at talking about racism and those kinds of social issues instead of actually having anything to say about them. I think Detroit Become Human spends a lot of time saying what is a human, but not doing as good a job at it as David Lynch or Hideo Kojima, and then also spends a lot of time saying racism is bad, actually.
yeah, I mean, I don't pretend that it is a super nuanced. Why are we talking about this? This has nothing to
This
do. Uh,
because it stars villains.
does it? I guess Heavy Rain does. Might. I've not played.
Heavy Rain stars one villain.
Anyway,
Spoilers.
the
Yes.
trouble with writing something like this and then having to talk about it is there's speaking of things that don't have a lot of nuance. There's really not a lot of nuance to this story. Like, there's not really any complicated themes. There's not a hidden message. There's not really a message at all. I just went all in on the horror, which is like, arguably, this is probably more of a horror story than the horror story I wrote for the horror cycle. I just dived into creating the most despicable person I could think of at the moment who isn't, in a certain set of documents in reality because I didn't want to go down that route. And I then had to sort of go, okay, well, I've decided that this is going to be about like a serial killer, and it's going to be from their perspective. I'm going to make him the protagonist of this story. Why? That was the most interesting part of writing it for me, was trying to figure out the motivation for the character, for why he does this. Because I didn't want to make a sympathetic villain, but I did want to make it understandable by his own twisted logic how he got to the place he got to.
Yeah, and you're definitely on the right way there because I don't know why, but when I first started reading the story, I was almost compulsively visualizing the villain as Serpentius if he was actually evil. But then it very quickly became, no, I've got Alistair in my head, actually. Human Alistair.
Yeah, much closer. Because there, a person like that, like, it was interesting trying to get into this character's head because he's not wrong about a lot of the things he says. He goes on this whole, I mean, you heard the story, you read the story. He goes on this very long rant about how, you know, he would never presume to assume that all human beings are violent individuals, at least in practice, but he does think humanity is a violent species. He thinks that we enjoy violence. People love watching combat sports. People love watching and playing violent media in outside of the realms of entertainment, there are people who beat their children and pretend it's discipline. There are people who are locked up and deprived of their freedom and brutalized for crimes that arguably hurt nobody. There are governments that invade other countries and impose their wills on entire populaces and call the people that die in those endeavors collateral damage, acceptable losses. And he sort of looked at the world and went, well, hang on a minute. Why is that okay, but it's not okay for me to peel this woman like an orange?
Apple, actually.
Pick a fruit. It's just shut up.
I know you just used apple in this story.
I know.
Pick a
Because
fruit. No, I choose potato.
yeah, that works too. And the thing is, I wanted it to be very clear, right, that this is not he's not looked at society and been broken by it. He was like this from the beginning. He was always inclined towards violence. He always got a thrill out of hurting people, out of seeing people get hurt. But when he was a kid, he repressed a lot of that. Like, well, when he was getting into his teenage years, he started repressing a lot of that because he kept being told, it's wrong, you can't do this. And then as he got older and started developing critical thinking more, he started going, well, wait, why? Because this is so contradictory to everything I see around me.
Yeah, exactly. And no, honestly, seeing how consistently like people in that position express feelings like that too, it's kind of made me think, I think maybe the one thing nobody can stand to really believe they are is like alone in how they see the world and how they feel. Like, because even the most fucked up people in like every setting I've seen who are like easily willing to just blatantly say like, yes, I'm a bad person, but none of them can say I'm uniquely bad. I'm the only one who's bad like this. I'm I'm the weirdo. I'm the one who's not normal. All the people who admit that they're monsters or that they like these bad things are like, I'm only human. It's normal. There are so many other people like me. There's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah, I think if he thought he was uniquely evil, his entire justification for why there's nothing really wrong with what he's doing would break down. The thing that enables him to do this and think that it is not morally correct, but guiltless, is that he genuinely believes that as a species, that is who we are at our core. And in fairness, there's a lot of things out there that are not contradicting that
Not
viewpoint.
in the news and everything. Although he'd find some more contradictions, whoopsie, if he spent more time walking around at ground level seeing regular people.
Well, I mean, that's the thing though. He does, I think, right? I don't think he doesn't see the people who are out there helping the homeless or feeding the poor, curing the sick. I don't think he's missing all of that. The charitable, genuinely good people, the heroes of the world, the people pulling each other out of burning buildings. I don't think he's missing that. I don't think that he is unaware of those things. I think that a character like this is going to look at those things and look at the things that line up with the what with his agenda, and he's going to decide that the violence and the destruction is who we are, and that the other things, the good things about us, are a front or there to justify our worst traits or to make us feel good. So when we do horrible things, we don't feel
Yeah,
the guilt or whatever. Like it's like you said, he doesn't presume to say that people, individuals, are all violent. But his argument is that if there was no social pressure, more people
yeah,
would be, I think. It's because look how many people are horrible, violent people, even with a whole system constructed to try and make us behave.
yeah. There's always there's always a certain amount of dogmatism to evil, I would say. I think even so many evil people almost have I think we have in just enough inherent like holding back and just enough inherent morality and concept of life if we can comprehend that kind of stuff to where being evil without
breaking requires committing to the bit. You have to put at least a
Yeah,
certain amount of effort into ignoring the contradictions into your proclivities and feelings and philosophy.
it's exactly like that. Madness is something you can't control. Evil is a
Yeah.
choice. And it doesn't matter what brand of evil it is. It doesn't matter how naturally inclined to it you are. Ultimately, you have to choose to do evil things. If you're crazy and you can't control it, that's one thing. You should still probably be locked up for your safety and the safety of others. But there's a big difference between I do not have control of my faculties and this guy who looks at what he's doing to his innumerable victims, openly says, this is morally wrong, and I'm probably a monster. I'm a bad person, and then chooses to do it anyway because he has constructed this reality where he can justify that choice.
Yeah. He's got a tiny little bender in his head saying, everybody's doing it. I just wanted to be popular. No.
I don't know about that. I mean, like, he clearly thinks of himself as a bit of an
Yes.
avant-garde artist, actually. Because that's the other thing with a character like this, like to have this reasoning, this like twisted logic, and decide it's correct despite any evidence to the contrary. There's got to be an amount of like ego to it as well, and I do think that shows in like when he's talking to his victim, and he basically says, "I'm never going to be caught. I'm going to keep doing this." Until I physically just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. They
And
yeah,
he
they
believes it.
there's the ego, and for the sake of both their ego and the fun they're trying to have, they have to convince themselves they're doing something, that there's some meaning to it, and not that some villains don't have genuine, if incorrect, meaning to what they're doing. But there's other people who are just making up a meaning because they need it. This can't just be, yeah, I'm killing people. It has to be, I'm creating art. I'm having my fun. The skin is my canvas, the blood is my paint, and their screams are my chorus.
Yeah, he's deranged, and clearly has a very twisted sense of art and artistry. But he does. He thinks of himself as an artist, as someone who it's I don't think he would look at what he does and go, there is some like deep meaning to it. It's entertainment to him. But drawing a picture is entertainment to a lot of people, and he looks at them in the same way.
The fact that somebody is being hurt means nothing to him. I mean, he likes it. He likes the hurting, but also like it has no weight on the situation or not, whereas the simplest version of enjoying something to a lot of people is whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody. And he's over here like,
Yeah,
where's the
he
fun in
he
that?
he stands directly contrary to that.
Exactly. And it's one of the things I always enjoy about villains like this too is that it also requires a certain amount of shallowness, which I think is why they put so much effort into the meaning and sometimes the dogma of what they're doing and how they enjoy it and why they enjoy it, is because at the end of the day, it starts from one very simple thing. And for somebody like this, no matter what else he is, at his core, deeper down than possibly any other part of him, he is purely and simply a sadist. And every single other thing about who he is something his brain constructed to either justify, intensify, sharpen, or make that more fun and facilitate being able to do it and satisfy it.
Oh yeah, like it's that ego again. He's deep down a very simple creature, but he has convinced himself that he is some grand intellectual avant-garde artist type who just sees the reality of the world that other people are willfully blind to. No, no, my dude, you just like cutting people up. or breaking their bones or whatever. Anything to hear
Yeah,
someone
the most
scream.
honest you've been with yourself was just the moment where you grabbed the knife and said, "I'm gonna peel her like an apple."
Yeah, and clearly, you could sort of look at him and go, I mean, surely there is healthier ways you could explore this. You could go to a BDSM club. There's people there who love being in pain. But there's no way that that would ever be
Yeah,
extreme
it's
enough
not
for
enough
him.
pain. He needs the kind of pain that somebody can only get when they are suffering enough for the reason to turn off and for them to become nothing more than a dying animal that is capable of human expression.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not just pain, it's suffering that he gets off on.
Animals and people trying to have fun cannot truly suffer the way a person at the peak of pain does, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately, if you go to a BDSM dungeon, everyone there is there because they want to be,
I
and
bet
that's
you he
not what
went to
he's
one
after.
at least once, and then he got to a point where the person he was torturing yelled something like, "Oh, yes, Daddy," and he was like, "Oh, you've ruined it." And just immediately he was like, "You're taking all the fun out of
I
this.
mean,
I'm leaving." And then he cut the person before he left.
honestly, maybe I could definitely see having it. Also, the fact that it's not a sexual thing for
That
him
too.
as well. He's not doing this because he gets his rocks off on it. He's there. This is not that kind of pleasure to him. This is a hobby.
Yep.
This is what he does for fun. Some people like to paint miniatures. He likes to paint walls with people's entrails.
You just know somewhere there's a James Patterson protagonist trying to track him down.
Oh, quite possibly. The problem is there's probably like six different James Patterson protagonists in different parts of the world who all think they're looking for a different person. And it's just him. Because the one thing he is right about, and that is genuinely kind of scary when you think about it, is that patents are what gets criminals caught, and DNA is what gets criminals caught. And if you have neither of those, if what is going on is truly random, the chances of the killer getting caught are not high.
Yeah.
Things are progressively higher these days, of course, between surveillance and social media scouring and just better and better forensics, of course. But compared to someone who is going after like a specific demographic or specific people that they know or following a consistent MO, someone like this is genuinely terrifying because he doesn't have a consistent MO. He's not going after specific people. He is not targeting people he knows. He's explicitly not targeting people he knows and choosing people basically at random. It doesn't matter what their gender is, it doesn't matter how old they are. He is just taking people he
Yeah.
can. And he's probably employing a whole host of different methods to do it.
Yeah. Like, he's almost certainly someone who will get caught at some point because no matter how hard he tries, doing something like this consistently does create patterns, even if it's only going to be the patterns that are so inconsequential or so normal to him that he doesn't even realize he's doing anything at all repeatedly. But that's enough. There's enough of obscurity that someone like this, probably, especially if I'm thinking of it from a narrative perspective, he's not going to get caught until a coincidence happens. I'm not sure what, but whatever it is, it's going to be coincidental. Like somehow, despite how careful he was, he kidnaps somebody who's under close watch from people who care about them or want something that are going to notice the second they're gone, and someone will investigate. There'll either be too many people for him not to make a scene, or it'll be somebody related to law enforcement who's left a trail as they try to follow or find or whatever. And he's probably not going to be in much real danger of getting caught until one of those coincidences just happens.
realistically speaking, one day someone is going to see something, or because he's clearly not careful about making sure people are dead before he leaves them, someone's going to
Yeah,
survive.
maybe it was the woman in this very story. What if she just survived having her throat slit?
Yeah. The thing with a character like this is they are doomed to fail and they don't even realize it. They are so high on their own success, on the fact that they haven't been caught yet, that they think
How could
they're
they comprehend
invulnerable.
getting caught? They're doing something so extreme. Surely, if they were going to get caught, it would have happened already.
Exactly. But it all it takes is one thing, and his entire house of cards is going to collapse, and he is going to be in prison.
And it'll be so, so awful and boring, especially if he's kept on a tight enough leash that he'll be really mad they didn't just kill him instead.
Oh yeah, like someone like this, a villain like this, you know when they get caught, their crash out is going to
Yeah,
be legendary.
every single possible variation of, you can't do this to me. And it's like, yeah, I bet you've heard other people say that a lot.
This is definitely the sort of character who would choose death over capture, not because of fear of the
Nope.
consequences, but because he could not handle a life that would without doing what he loves. The monotony would be torture for him, and I mean he's seen how people respond to torture, and he clearly isn't going to want to go through that himself. So he would definitely choose death
Yeah,
over capture.
he's made it clear he's not immune to pain and suffering himself. He sure made sure he wasn't going to get kicked in the head again.
Exactly.
That guy was big. That hurt. I I got dizzy for a minute. If I hadn't immediately cut his tendons after that, I would have been oh, that would have been close.
Yeah, I mean that is such a demonstration. Like I put that in there for a couple of reasons. One was because, weirdly enough, I felt like it was maybe the best example of how divorced from empathy he is, because it showed that he understands pain. He understand like he's not a Cenobite.
Yeah, he's not a sadomasochist. He's just a sadist.
Yeah. It's not that he doesn't understand. Like he's not I guess the point I was trying to make is like it's not just that he's not into pain himself. It's that he clearly understands what
Yeah,
he's doing to these
it's
people.
not there's no lack of awareness or understanding. There's no ignorance to enable him to to ignore that he's hurting people or to not know what hurting people really means. He absolutely does, and he loves it. As long as it's not him.
Exactly. It's yeah, he's a very selfish existence. You can't be a serial killer and
Yeah.
not be. So that was one of the important things, like one of the big reasons I included that. The other one was to show two things, two other things, I should say. One, he has been doing this for a long time. He has been doing this long enough that he has made mistakes and learned to correct those mistakes. He has gotten good at this now. But on the flip side of that coin, he has made mistakes. He's not infallible. He only thinks he is. It was to highlight the fact that whilst the things you say about why he would be hard to catch are all true, he is not some like perfect Hollywood serial killer mastermind who will never be
Yeah,
caught.
he's no oh no, what was the killer in Seven called? Dang it, I don't even remember if Seven was the name of the movie. He's no that guy. That was the hardest I've ever seen a story commit to. No, the killer really is 5 steps ahead of everybody all the time.
I mean, it's very rare for for one of these characters to like the masterminds, even the horrific killers, the criminal overlords, the whatever. Like typically, they always get caught in the end or they die, and that's the path this guy is on too, realistically speaking. But I think it was important to me to highlight the ego of it because I was very much trying to be going at this from his perspective. I wanted to show that he is not nearly as faultless and infallible as he thinks he
You know, it
is.
would be a really funny, if slightly on the nose, like blatant ironic way to see a guy like this crack. For him, for him to be in the middle of schmoozing and working one of his targets at some point, whether it is tracking them or interacting with them or what. And it turns out the person he happens to target this time is exactly like him, but they just happened to act a little faster, and he's the one who ends up caught by someone just like him, and he simultaneously gets to suffer with what he's already gone through, but also have that little moment of, huh, see? There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just like everyone else.
Yeah, it would be a moment of vindication followed by a
Hmm.
lot of suffering. And he would not get to enjoy that
Nope.
vindication for long. He would have it the whole time, but it would there would come a point where it would cease to
He
matter.
would crack, and the funny part is the person who caught him would hardly notice the difference between him or any other mark, because once he started screaming, "Ah, I've already done this to people," or "Ah, I'm so much more of an artist than you," it really would barely sound any different to the person who caught him than all their other victims.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like he said so himself. After a while, all the stuff that they say is just it got
Yep.
dull. The only thing that doesn't is the screams, the
Mhm, yeah,
suffering.
exactly. And boy, would he scream.
Oh God, yeah. You know, once you've heard all the begging, the pleading, the indignation for enough times, you've heard it all. But he'll never get tired of the reason he really does it, because he's not about psychological pain.
Nope.
Only in the sense that he a human being has a lot more capacity to understand what is happening to them.
Yeah, exactly. This is a guy who would actually be to to call back to our last week a little bit. This is a guy who would make an interesting one-off, like Penny Dreadful style Batman villain. It's like, oh, sorry, you're not complex enough to
Oh,
show up
he's
again. You only get to be in um one story, but it'll be a good one.
yeah, I mean in fairness, he's in a very similar camp to the
Yeah,
Joker, to be fair.
it's just that the Joker also does have goals and a message.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, there's no message in this story. You could almost sort of go, well, I mean, maybe, like, I'm sure if they never heard this episode or whatever, someone in like an English lit class or something might read through this and go, oh, I see what he's doing here. The villain's point of view is explicitly in here to highlight the hypocrisy of these very bad things that we do. And I mean, maybe because that sort of thing is stuff that I think about, so it probably came through a bit, but it's not the point of the story. The point very much was just getting in the head of this guy and going, well, that's how he's justifying it. It's how
Yeah,
he sees the
especially
world.
because this guy's hypocrisy is almost like coincidental, because he's not denying or refusing to face the fact that he wouldn't like somebody to do the same things that he does, or that he's like morally justified or anything like that. The only part of him that's really hypocritical is just simply the fact that he couldn't put up with the same things he's doing from the other perspective, and he has no ground to stand on. And he's at least partially acknowledgent of that. So, like, there's hypocrisy, but it's genuinely coincidental hypocrisy, which you don't see very often.
I don't think that this character as a protagonist would work in a long form story the
No,
same
he's
way he
too
does in a
simple.
short form because he is so simple and so shallow. If you were telling this story from the perspective of someone who's realized he's out there, the dopes of this universe, and just every now and then cut back to this guy or to one of his victims who was experiencing from the other side, like that would be a very different story, and it would be you could do that long form, but because he is so simplistic and so shallow, I genuinely don't think you could do a story from his perspective in a longer form
No,
than this.
somebody like him, there's not a whole lot to do with him besides show what he's doing once, show him getting caught or stopped once, and maybe spend some time showing the life of one of his victims or something before he kills them. And beyond that, you would just get into the same thing over and again, and it would be boring because the only way you could enjoy watching him do what he does beyond that is if you enjoyed the same things he does.
Pretty much. I mean, look, if you're someone who has violent fantasies but would never actually engage in it, fine, that's one thing.
Maybe still don't lean into those fantasies. That your brain likes to rewire itself according to things like fantasies. So if you know something is bad, you should probably also try not to think about it too much.
I'm just saying that if you look at this story and go, I really wish I could like read more of the torturing the victims. If you're never going to act on it, good. But you know, maybe talking to someone about it couldn't be a bad thing.
That's one of those things that like the feelings alone do not make you a bad person because you can't really control your thoughts or feelings. But if it's if it's a bad thing, especially if you are aware enough that it is a bad thing you're thinking of, you can still control your actions and you should probably do something about it. Something to avoid getting to the point where you feel like creating those thoughts in reality because again, you know it's bad and people are very colorful, interesting people. And even if you do have bad thoughts like that, that's not all you are. And there are ways you can find to satisfy yourself and live a happy life that you don't have to indulge in those things.
Yeah, like this guy would tell you otherwise. This guy would sort of go, "Oh, see, you're just like me. We're all fucking murderous, crazy people deep down." But that's the thing. It's like we said at the beginning of the episode. Not really, because intent does matter, sure, but evil is a choice. You have to act on whatever your horrific impulse is to be evil, you know, and that's where this guy's philosophy falls apart. He thinks that just having the thought makes someone the
And
same
he
as him.
can't accept the fact that he is making a choice and he's continuing to make a choice every time he does it. It's not simply who he is, it's who he's chosen to be.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I mean, he'd probably make that choice every time because he is a very damaged person who found the justification he needed to stop trying
Yeah,
to
he
control it.
decided a long time ago that satisfying these proclivities is all that matters to him, and he doesn't want anything else, which, you know, there's always at least a certain amount of tragedy here because this guy is blatantly a bad person and a monster. He should be stopped. But there's always at least a little bit of tragedy because simply by virtue of being a human, and especially the fact that there was a time when, because he was told he should, he held back on those things and fought against them, that he could have been more, he could have been better, he could have found other ways to be happy and to have fun besides that, and he made his choice.
Yeah, you do sort of the one of the things that is interesting about a character like this, like beyond the shallowness, is that it does raise questions of how they got to this point. Because you have to sort of look at that and go, well, you did try to stop, but maybe the problem there was you were told that it was wrong and then you had to stop, but that's where the support ended.
Nobody really taught you that it was wrong. Nobody really showed you what else you could be, what other ways to be happy there were.
Or even just healthier ways to process what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Maybe if somebody had taken him out fishing and he could have got those instead,
Fish don't scream.
you know, but their mouths hang open and their eyes are wide, you could pretend.
I mean, that's it. Like, You know, maybe he could have been a hunter, I guess, but I don't know if that would have ever been enough either, really.
I'm thinking of Alistair again.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say, if there was any hope for someone like this, or if they were always going to be like that. I don't know if I have it. Well, I mean, I know for a fact I don't have the psychological study behind me to say one way or the other, really.
No, and like I mean, even for people who do have all that information and do study it, that psychology, especially about deep human things like this, is one of the areas where once you've decided you know what the answer is, you've limited yourself, and even if you give the best answer you possibly can, it's still probably not going to be the whole answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Humans are messy.
This guy is very messy.
Oh yeah, but that's not a mess, it's art. He has a little sign right on the wall by the canvas that says bless this mess. And he has another one that
Uh,
says home is where the heart is, and one of the actual hearts of one of his victims is nailed to it. And he keeps it with him everywhere he goes, so he's always at home.
that is one thing I can say for sure is he's probably not keeping trophies.
No. No, well, because that one's not a trophy. It's just home. It's a decoration. He's trying to be comfy.
That is the thing, right? It is a lot of, I mean, real serial killers too, to be fair, but a lot of killers in these sort of stories, the thing that does get them caught in the end is that they keep trophies. But I can say with certainty that this guy doesn't, because it's not about the killing specifically.
Nope, it's about the pain. In fact, if he could keep them awake and alive and never stop, he would. He doesn't actually enjoy killing at all because when you kill, the fun is over for him. It just so happens that if he indulges in his desires, then inevitably they're gonna die.
And I mean, they need to so he can keep doing it. Death is a side effect and a convenience for him, but it's not the goal.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, now that I'm done playing, I need you to shut up. More so than than actually wanting to kill.
He doesn't even stay to watch. He
Nope.
just assumes, well, you're no one's gonna like. There's no reason for anyone to be able to find you here. You're not capable of screaming anymore. Yeah, and you're gonna bleed out eventually. I'm out of here.
Yeah, now that I think about it, if it's not a coincidence, then what ultimately really gets him caught is probably just going to be when somebody happens to survive and has a way of talking and trying to help identify him, or when he gets found out because he ends up catching somebody who's actually so tough that it just takes too long for them to die and he gets found.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone who is so tough that they can withstand the sorts of horrific shit that he is doing for a long period of time to be, but all it takes is for them to be able to make enough noise at the right moment.
Yeah, and there are people who have survived things nobody should, so you never know. Some people just have different kinds of brains or different kinds of bodies that just won't react the way you think they're supposed to the trauma.
I mean, there are genuinely some people who are incapable of feeling pain. That would be the worst that would be this guy's nightmare scenario.
Yeah, because he's too dedicated to his art. He wouldn't be able to just say, "Oh, well, clearly this isn't working," and then finish them off. He would instead be meeting the challenge and trying to make it work and just like, why won't you scream? What's
I mean, I think once he realized what was going on, he probably would just end it and go because he doesn't want to be caught. But
But when would he realize that it was that and not just someone who's really tough or something?
I don't know. I hadn't even thought of the scenario until 30 seconds ago. It's always something when you have to step into the mind of a character like this.
Yeah, because we can logic it out all we want, but we can't really fully throw ourselves into his head because it's not a good place to be. We don't live there.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people who struggles a lot with dealing with like writing. Like some people I think when I know for a fact some people when they write stories like this, they have to sit there for a while after and go, and now I need something fluffy. I don't really have that, but you do sort of write something like this and go, right, that was really fucked up.
That came out of my brain.
Yeah. Like there's always a moment of reflection of Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me?
Why was I able to think of all that?
Like, am I okay? I mean, the answer is yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah,
You know, the people who write all these horrific things down, 9 times out of 10, they are pretty chill.
yeah,
Some of the nicest people I've met are horror writers.
yeah, because I mean, it's kind of hard to do it more than a certain amount without being able to, like, I don't even want to say it's partially emotional detachment, but it's a more specific type of attachment than emotional because you are detaching yourself from some of the emotions of writing something like that, but not all of them, because if you're invested in it and you're working on it, you're still going to have feelings about your work and what you wrote and all that. But at the same time, your feelings, it's like a very clear wall where your feelings for the work and the characters in it are staying on the fiction side of the wall, even though the feelings themselves are, of course, not fictional. Where like it's hard to put into words, but I've kind of always had the same thing where part of why I can watch so much horror and stuff is kind of because my what you call it? I the oh no, I forgot the Turner phrase. The
Immersion, empathy, fourth wall.
no, the I remember of disbelief, but not the first part of it.
Oh, suspension.
Yeah, my suspension of disbelief is in a way kind of both very strong and very weak at the same time, in that like I need you to make me believe that what you're writing isn't stupid nonsense and could happen, but I also nothing ever breaches the wall of oh, but it isn't happening for me as I experience these things.
I mean, I think that's just like what it is for everyone, to be honest.
Well, there's some people who can't though. There's some people who like no, but if this is something that like that I would hate and I don't want to see happen to anyone ever, then it makes me uncomfortable and I can't do this. And like
Oh yeah,
that does not happen to me unless there's a very, very small list of extremely intense things that can make that happen to me, and those are it.
yeah, that's fair. I suppose it's less about suspension of disbelief and more just about tolerance.
Yeah, I have extremely high tolerance to see things that I don't like happen on a screen as long as they're not real.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I definitely wouldn't blame someone if they like got like to the third paragraph in this and were like, you know what? No.
I don't need to hear about this.
This is a mind I don't need to step into, and I would not blame someone for feeling that way about this work because even as I was writing it, I was going, this may be one of the most fucked up things I've ever written. And I've written some messed up shit.
And you know what? Even though there's nothing wrong with writing these kinds of things, if you have that feeling while you're along the way of reading something like this where you don't feel like you want to, you should pretty much always listen to that feeling. If you're getting that feeling, it is like a warning that experiencing this kind of thing is going to either hurt you or just not make you happy. And if it's going to affect you negatively, then there's no reason for you to keep going. And that's
Oh,
totally fine because, with some things, with things where not such horrible things are happening, that could just be called giving up and not giving the thing a chance. But if you know it's going to be like painful and suffering and it's going to be unpleasant for you in a non-qualitative qualitative way, then yeah, of course, save yourself whatever stress or whatever it's going to cause you.
yeah, there's like some weird social pressures when it comes to like fiction and media on both sides where you're almost expected to like dark, messed up things for some reason.
Yeah, it's like as soon as it became socially acceptable, it also became socially expectable.
It's almost like an element of elitism to it, where someone's like, "What like? This is so dark and messed up. It's so that makes it deep, and it doesn't. Like the story isn't deep. It's not.
If a story is deep, it's deep because of actual deep things. Pain and suffering on its own is not deep.
Yeah, like it's interesting to get into the mind of a character like this, but it's again." I wouldn't call this a deep story. There's no moral to it. There's not really any complex messaging or themes or anything like that. Certainly not compared to some of the other things I've written for the show and for other reasons. This was just an experiment in, okay, I'm gonna try and write from the perspective of one of the worst people I can think of because we're doing a cycle on villains, and that seems interesting.
Yeah, it was a good way to go about it, and it was interesting.
But it's also very shallow, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm running out of things to say about it.
It's okay. We've been going long enough, and I think there should be a certain amount of shallowness to it because I will say again, pain and suffering is not deep. And if somebody who wants to go around hurting other people comes off as deep to you, you should sit and think about that for a little bit and think about what it is about the situation that's actually deep or actually makes you feel that way. Because if it is the pain and suffering, as we already said in another section, go talk to somebody because it's not. People can be deep, people can have deep feelings, and those are affected by pain and suffering, but they're not caused by pain and suffering. Don't give credit to the wrong thing because that's how bad people and killers get glorified. That's how we get things like the horrible phenomenon of people attracted to serial killers despite them being objectively awful people.
Oh God, and all those like the fucking Dharma documentary or
Awful.
yeah, like just as a side note, if a documentary seems to be like oddly glorifying a horrible, horrible person from like reality, like like the Ted Bundy one, there is something inherently disingenuous about that. Keep that shit in fiction.
Yeah, not just because there's nothing glorious about those people, but because the people doing this would have probably already ended up getting caught themselves as if they thought this really was glorious, which means they're just pandering to the people who are sick or damaged in that way for money, which means they're not trying to be genuine and serious and honest. And that's the whole point of a documentary.
Yeah, well said. Anyway, we'll leave that there because let's be honest, there's not that much to say about this story, and we are both deliriously tired and just going all over the place. So we'll call that one. If you guys have enjoyed the madness that was this episode and the extreme madness that was this story, you can find both more of my stories and more of my podcast episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com. You can also find poetry there and blogs, articles, that sort of thing. You can buy my books there, which I always appreciate. If you would like to listen to more rambling from John here, you can find him streaming on Twitch and YouTube as Sephir, Sephear, or doing more collaborative stuff with me on my site as well.
That's me. And remember, if the world is your canvas, paint makes much better paint than blood.